Hello guys, and welcome to the second part of my tutorial on how to create an inventory system for Blender game engine. We will continue from where we had stopped. In the previous part, as you remember, we had created a special text file, CSV, a comma separated values file, text file, and it looked something like that. It contains all the data, all the properties of the weapons of our game, and these properties are categorized to some categories: ID, name, damage value, type, quantity, and max quantity. And I said that this is a special text file because it uses those semicolon characters as separators to the values. And today what we are going to do is we are going to work a bit with Blender to import this data from the CSV file to the Blender and transform it to a form that Blender can understand. And afterwards we are going to save this imported data to a file, to a separate file, and from where we will be able to retrieve this data. Then we will be able to change the data, the properties of the weapons, and then we can save back again to this new external file. So to get started, what we need is to go to this view, the game logic view, and we don't have to add something. We are going to write just code today. And generally what I want to say is that if you want to create a complicated game, something more serious, don't attempt to do it just by using the logic bricks. The logic bricks may be flexible enough, they may give you some possibilities, but you can't create something complicated. So you have to limit somehow the use of the logic bricks and start learning writing code, and specifically Python for Blender game engine. But we can't avoid totally the logic bricks, and so we will start from the logic bricks. What we are going to do is we are going to select our main camera, and generally I prefer to assign all my general scripts of the game to my camera because it is easy to track them. You just have to select your camera and you will be able to see all the main scripts of your game. You can have different scripts for your characters or for your weapons, but it's good to keep all the main scripts attached to your main camera. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add an always sensor and a controller, a Python controller, and I'm going to connect them. What is important is that I want this script I'm going to write to be executed once in the beginning of the game. In order to do this, I have this always sensor, and as it is with its current configuration, it's a lie. It is not an always sensor. An always sensor supposedly repeats itself in every game cycle, but this always sensor will send just one pulse in the beginning of the game. If you want it later somewhere in your game, if you want to add the sensor that will repeat itself in every game cycle, you have to press this button here to activate the true level triggering mode, the pulse mode, and this will send a pulse in each game cycle. But as I've said, we don't want it to send pulses in each game cycle, so leave it as it is. If it is activated in your file, just deactivate it. So we connect the sensor with our controller here, and we have opted for a Python controller. What we need to add is a script. If we click here, we see there are no existing scripts, so we are going to create our first script. So press this button, the new button here, to create a new script, and let's name it db import, from database import. Now here in the list we can see our db import file, and we have created the connection to this to the script we are going to write right now. Just as in every Python script for Blender game engine, the first thing we have to do is to import the BGE module, which contains all the submodules and functions and commands we need for a game. Furthermore, we are going to add another module, the CSV module, and if you remember the text file we had created with the database of our weapons, it was a CSV value, so you can easily understand what this CSV module does. It can it can read and open CSV files and import them to the Blender game to Python. Furthermore, from BGE module, I'm going to import from BGE module. I'm going to import the logic submodule, which is the basic submodule I'm going to use. And having done this, I'm going to import to create a variable, and I'm going to assign to this variable as a value the database of my weapons. How am I going to do this? Just with this command, CSV reader. The CSV reader will open the file I'm going to specify, and it's going to read its contents and store them to the DB variable. So what is the name of the file I want to read? It's db weapons CSV. What sorry, we have to say to open this file, open the db weapons CSV file, and I have to specify furthermore open and do what with it. I want it to open the db weapons CSV file and open it in read mode. In this mode I'm able to read the contents of the file, but I won't have the ability to change or to save in this file, to make changes or to save. What I want from now is just to read the contents of the file. So with this command I say that I want you to open my db weapons CSV file in read mode. But until now I have some omissions. First of all, how will Blender understand where this CSV file is placed in my hard disk? So I have to do some actions before I go on. First of all, I have to save my blend file in the same folder with my database. Let me track it in my computer. I think here it is, so I'm naming it and tutorial inventory, and I'm saving my Blender file. Okay, now if I check my folder with the database, here is my Blender file too. So is this enough so that Blender will understand where my CSV file is? No, unfortunately Blender will look for this file in the root of your PC. So you have to somehow say to make it understand that it's on the same folder with your Blender file. And how we do this? We just add this command logic expand path two slashes plus db weapon csv, and I have to add, I think, another slash here. Okay, what I have done here is that I told it this logic expand path returns the path of where my Blender file is saved. So this is going to return the exact path where my Blender file is saved, and with this part here I add the specific file I wanted to open. So I'm almost done here. I have just to add another option in the reader, in the command of the reader. I have to specify what my delimiter will be, and it was the semicolon. Delimiter, not deletimer. Delimiter. Okay, so if I reopen my CSV file, okay, you see that my separator or delimiter is the semicolon. So you better specify this in your command too, that your delimiter will be the semicolon, so that there won't be problems during the reading of the CSV file. Now I have to check if my database was imported as expected. In order to do this, I'm going to add a for loop for row in db. What this loop will do is that it's going to read my db line by line. Okay, it's going to in the first turn of my loop, it's going to read the first line, the first row, then in the second, third, fourth, and finally the fifth row. So in each circle of my loop, it's going to store each line of the database in this variable, the row variable. So if I print my row, the row variable for each turn, I will be if I print, we will see the result as expected. But before we might be able to see this result, we have to make one more step. We have to go here in Window and activate the system console, and that's why the result of the print command will be shown here. So if I go to my 3D window and press P, the game starts. We don't see anything, and we don't want to see anything. We just want our code to be executed, and then press escape and check your console. Okay, so you see now, first of all, we have seen that our loop has made 5 turns, 5 cycles. In the first cycle, it had stored these values: ID, name, damage, value, type, quantity, and max quantity into the row variable. And in the same way, in the second row, it has it has assigned these values to the row variable. In the third cycle, in the fourth, and in the fifth. So we see for each cycle the row variable takes different values. One more thing is that the row value doesn't take just a single value. It takes a series of values: ID, name, damage, value, type, quantity, and max quantity. And these values we can see that there are these brackets at the beginning and at the end, and these are the identifiers of a list. A list in Blender, it can contain variable number of elements, and the elements are these: ID, name, damage, value, type, quantity, and max quantity. Here we have 7 elements stored in this list, and so we say that the length of this list is 7, and each element of this list can be identified by its index. The thing with indices is that they don't begin with number 1. So specifically, ID won't be identified as element number 1, but as element number 0. The second element is identified as the first with the index 1, and the final with the index 6. So if I wanted to see what the first element of my list is, I would have just to print the first element of the row variable. So if I press P and escape again and check my console, okay, you see that now only the first element of each list is shown. So if you haven't understood, probably you have to watch another tutorial on lists in Python, but I will presume that you have understood, and I will go on. Okay, what I want now is that if we see again our lists, our rows, we see that the first row contains the headers of our columns of the properties of the weapons, and I want to store them in a different variable, so I may be able to call them whenever I want. So I will do it with a special method. First of all, I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to assign it the true value, and this means that each header is a Boolean variable. What I wanted to do is to check whether my row is the header row. Okay, from my file, I know that the first row of my database contains the headers. So I simply have to write a simple if statement. If is header, I don't have to write equals true. Python understands that I'm seeking for whether is header value variable is true. So if is header variable is true, and when will this happen? In the first row, because my loop has just started. Create another variable and assign as a value the row variable, and change the value of the isHeader boolean variable to false. Why? Because I don't want it to continue to execute again this piece of code, because I have already assigned my headers into this, the header value, the header variable. And let's check if those values were stored normally. So press P and escape, check. Okay, you see that the header variable contains the headers of my database. Now that we have the headers, we are going to save in another form all the data that is contained in the db variable, and to do this I'm going to use dictionaries. What a dictionary is, let's say that let's take the lists we had. Okay, we had this list that has ID, name, damage, value, type, quantity, and max quantity as elements. If I want to refer to a specific element of the list, I have to refer to its index. Okay, which for example, for type it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to write row in brackets 4, and you can see this easily just by print row 4. Press P and check your console. Okay, and we see that it prints just the fourth element of each list. Yes, but it's not easy for me to remember which index corresponds to every column, and for this reason uh, I have to better use a dictionary, because in dictionaries the values of the elements of the list of the dictionary are not specified by their index, but they are identified using a special key, and this key is what I am assigning it to these values. So if I create a dictionary, let's call it dict, and then I create a key for the dictionary, dict name equals to Peter. What I have written here is that I want to create a dictionary, and I want to further create a key called name, and I want this key to take the value Peter. So if I print my dictionary, okay, I have some error here. Let me see, maybe I have to, okay, let me create temp dict equals this. Okay, now by using this line, these brackets, I don't know what their name in English is, these special brackets, I'm assigning my temp dict variable as a dictionary, and then I assign the value Peter to the key name. So if I press P and escape, okay, class dict, no dict, sorry, class, press P and escape. Okay, here is our dictionary. It has name and its value Peter. So if I were to write print the value of the name key of the temp dictionary, okay, that would print Peter. Okay, so print the name value of my temporary dictionary, and it prints Peter. And that's what I'm going to use to save my data, my database data, into another form. So since we don't want this code to be repeated again, we have to write an else statement that will be executed when this code is not won't be executed anymore, and this will happen for the second row of our database, and so on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add another loop from call in range 1 to length of row. Okay, what does this loop does? This loop reads and stores in the call variable all the elements of each row. And to see it better, print call, press P and escape. No, from for call P and escape. Okay, it prints just the number. Print row of call. P. So what I did here is that I give this variable the numbers from that range from 1 to 6 to 7. This is the length of the row from 1 to 7 because we said that my row variable has a length of 7 items. What this does is that it starts from the second element, which is identified with the first index name, not name because we said that this piece of code starts whenever after my headers are assigned to the header variable. So it starts from here, from the first element of the second row, and then it goes to the to the third element, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh element. So what I have printed here is just exactly that.
Threat has been detected.
Okay, and some threat has been detected. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I'll check this later. Okay, so it displays short sword, the damage, the value, the wielding type, and quantity and max quantity. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to save these values, these separate values, into my temporary dictionary. So I don't want this line anymore. I want just an empty temporary dictionary. So in this temporary dictionary, header of the call is equal to row call. Okay, what I'm doing, I'm assigning new keys and these keys are the headers of my columns, and to these keys I'm assigning the values of the columns that are below the headers. So I'm not good in words, so I prefer to show it with an example. So I just print my temporary dictionary, press P and escape, check my console. Okay, didn't like something, it didn't like that. I don't need this here, here. The same mistake I have done here. Okay, now that's the correct. Press P and escape. Check it. Check here and no, I won't do it for all for each loop because it's very confusing. I will add the print command here. Press P. Okay, let's check again. Okay, that's what we have here. We have a dictionary that has a key name and the value short sword, the key type and the value 100, the key quantity with the value 1, the key value with the value 10, the key damage with the value 5, and the key max quantity with the value 1. And that's for the second row of our database. In the next loop, in the third row of our database, the temp dictionary has the name key with the battle axe value, the type key with the 200 value, etc. etc. So what I have done for each loop of my row is that I have created a temporary dictionary that has the headers as keys and the values as the properties of my objects. What I want to do now is that I want all these values to be saved in another dictionary, and because you see that in each loop of my row loop, the temporary dictionary keys take other values. In the second row, it has the name key has the sword value, but in the third, it has the battle axe value. In the fourth, the small bow value. So I want it, before these changes happen, I want this temporary dictionary to be stored in another dictionary so that I won't lose this data. And for this purpose, I'm going to use a special dictionary, the global dictionary, logic global dict. This global dictionary is a special dictionary that Blender game engine provides, and it's very useful because you can store it in your hard disk, and you can retrieve it at any time. So if you want to make a save load routine, or if you want to change to a new scene, you can save your data to this global dictionary, and then you can load this global dictionary and be able to pass variables from scene to scene, or from Blender file to Blender file. So I'm assigning this global dictionary to a variable, this variable called GD. And what I'm going to do is that after this loop ends, I'm going to assign to create a new key for my GD dictionary header. As a header, it will have the column. Let me not the column. Let me check my file because it has been some time. Okay, yes, row 0. Okay, as a key, I will assign new key that will be the first element of each row. And remember, for the for loop, we had started from the first element. We had omitted from the second element. We had omitted the first element because I want to use the first element with the index 0. I want to use it as a key for my second dictionary. And I will give it as a value the temp dict. What I have done now is that I have created a nested dictionary, and you can easily see that by printing the GD dictionary. Press P and escape. Okay, this is it, the GD dictionary. It contains all the data we need, but it's on a different form, and so we might be able to retrieve it more easily. So what we have here, first of all, we have our first key, which is W304, and its value, it's not a simple value, it's another dictionary that has itself has its own keys. For the W004, it has the name value, a pack of arrows, the type with the value arrows, the quantity key with the value 10, and so on. So if I wanted to take to retrieve a value from my dictionary, I would say from dictionary GD load my weapons to damage. Let's play P and see the result, and the result is 3. What it did, it searched here, it found my first weapon, here it is, so it found my first weapon, and then it checked here and found its damage, and it returned 3. So you see that this is an easy way to be able to refer to properties of my weapons. So if you want to check in a hit what damage will your weapon do, you just have to write this command here, and it will return the damage the weapon will inflict to your enemy. What I'm going to do now is I will save this global dictionary to a separate file in my hard disk, just by writing logic save global dict and brackets. What this command will do is that it's going to save a different file, a config file, and it's going to save it in the same folder with my Blender file. So if I press P and escape and I check the folder where my Blender file is, we can see this bg config file that contains all the data from the global dictionary. If I edit it, okay, we can see that it's these values, these keys and values are from my global dictionary. As I can see, they are not totally encrypted, so you may have to write another script to encrypt and decrypt this file, but this is much more difficult, and I'm not going to do this, maybe in a future tutorial. But for now, let's go back to our file and resume what we have done today. First of all, we created a new scene. We saved our Blender file in the same folder with our database. We imported both BG modules and CSV modules, so we may be able to read the CSV file that contains the database of our weapons. Then we use the reader to open our database, our CSV file database, and store it into a variable. And then we created a loop, and this loop for the first line, for the first row of the database, is used to save the first row into the header variable. And for the rest of the rest rows, we did two things. First of all, we created a temporary dictionary that contains all the values from all the fields of our database, and secondary, we stored this temporary dictionary to our global dictionary, and we used as new keys the first elements of our rows. And finally, we saved the global dictionary, our global dictionary. We saved it into our hard disk, into a separate file that has the same name with our Blender file, and is stored in the same folder. And I'm going to stop for now. I think it was too much knowledge, especially for beginners. And I repeat, if you don't understand this, you have to go a few steps back and learn some more Python, watch a few tutorials. I would recommend tutorials on lists and dictionaries. And if you feel comfortable with lists and dictionaries, come back and watch again this tutorial. You will find it easier to follow then. But for now, I'm going to leave it as it is, and in the third part of the tutorial, we will see how we can use this information we have stored in our file, in our config file, and how can we take advantage of it for our inventory system. So remember to save your file, and until the next time, have fun and keep practicing. And thank you for watching me.